I found that what I was writing was resonating with people, and it was resonating with people because they were seeing that they don't have to have a huge story for it to be a valuable story. And that made me realize that there's a lot of value in everyday lessons, in everyday connections, and in feeling like we can relate somehow to somebody. Sometimes that's more valuable than hearing a story that is someone who has, ran 23 marathons in a year and a half that most of us are not even going to do in our lifetime. And it just seems so unattainable that we can't relate to how that can help us.
You are now listening to the podcast where authors inspire listeners to become authors, the Going North Podcast. I'm your host, certified self-leadership trainer, best-selling author, and book enthusiast Dom Brightman. And you're going to be listening to a different author that will inspire you to join the business of immortality, known as authorship. Now let the fun begin. Today's episode is sponsored by the Going North Podcast.com shop. It is going to help you have northbound direction to your own success. If you want a great inspirational quote like advance others to advance yourself, or today a reader, tomorrow a leader, heck, even some puns like pile on and always fully booked on your tote bag, mug, hoodie, heck, even a t-shirt, and many, many other items. Head over to goingnorthpodcast.com, click on the shop tab, and cop yourself some merchandise indeed. And that's goingnorthpodcast.com/shop. And today on the highlight reel builder for authors known as GMP, the Great, Glorious, and Glamorous, it's the Going North Podcast. And we got another wonderful human, courtesy of the wonderful book indeed that's been spearheaded by Peggy Williams and Dr. Marcus Vetstein, indeed, the wonderful Win the Wellness War. Because, hey, what is war good for? Absolutely nothing. But hey, when it comes to Wellness War, it's absolutely everything. Because today's guest in particular is a fellow best-selling bookcaster, y'all. That's right, indeed. So that means my man not only joined the business of immortality known as authorship, he also hosts a wonderful podcast of his own, and he's also a radio show host in his local town, if I'm not mistaken. And on top of that, he's a motivational speaker, comedian, as well as a business and life change coach. So let's give it up for the AV who's coming to probably a TV near you in the near future, the one and only Andy Vargo. How you doing today, Andy?
Dom, with an intro like that, I am doing awesome. I cannot help it. You know how to put a big smile on people's face. Thank you so much. It's awesome to be here.
Oh, my pleasure indeed. Here's one of the better parts of the podcast before the rabbit holes appear. That's right, indeed. I guess in case if we talking about a conversation no one knows about, it'll be an armadillo hole.
Right. Yeah.
But hey, it ain't about armadillos because porcupines might get jealous. So my goodness, mind filling in any cavities I may have missed about you from the intro, since your first time here on the podcast.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much. You covered it. You got it. Author, speaker. I have a little fun with some stand-up comedy, but it's all about just inspiring the world.
There you go. So I'm guessing at the age of 13, did you ever see yourself becoming an author?
No, I always wanted to be an author, but I never saw that as a career, like as a path to take. It wasn't the logical thing to do, and it was just one of those ideas that could never get out of my head. And at some point, it's like, this is what I've got to be doing. And over the years, I started book after book after book, and was at odds with the fact that I was a starter and not a finisher. And finally, the last few years started cranking out the books, and it was an honor to be a part of Win the Wellness War, and had to go back and think, well, what part of my story do I put into that? And that's just such an amazing book to be part of a collaboration with. So I love it.
As I'm talking about indeed, as I'm talking about indeed. So what inspired you to make that choice for the story to share in the book, my man? Because I'm pretty sure there probably could have been so many different routes you could have gone.
Right. That's so true. And that was one of the things, when Peggy asked me to join the project, and she said, it's simple, just share a story anytime in your life. You can give me something you've already put out in the world. It doesn't matter. And I thought, oh, this will be easy. I've written so much stuff. I've got so much content. And I tell you, it was a soul searching moment. I went to grab something. I was like, this doesn't feel right. I don't feel good about this. Like, just didn't feel like the thing for that wellness war. And I really had to go to the darkest time in my life and think this was the time where I was at kind of a low moment and had to pivot and change my attitude and change my perspective and take a step back in order to decide how I wanted to re-enter the world. And that moment seemed so obvious to me as the moment that needed to be shared, because that was so important in my life. It was transformational. It took me to the next level just by stepping out for a couple days from all the noise in the world. And so that's the story that I get into there. And but it was definitely a journey to rewrite it and come back and think about it. And it's like, man, I didn't expect to go back to all these dark places and be crying in the coffee shop. I'm like, oh my God, this is what life was like.
Oh wow, so I guess that was a few years ago then.
Yeah, so that was about 6 years ago for me. It was after my divorce. It was about a year out for my divorce, and it was when you're kind of doing that thing of, I thought I was making choices to make life better, and why does life feel worse? And you realize it's, oh, you know what, there's a lot more healing involved, and there's a lot of, when you cut yourself, that thing just starts itching, and it feels more pain while it's healing, but that's what has to happen for you to actually get to that better place. And you're like, oh, now I can look back and say it was worth it. I might not have understood it at the time. I had hoped that it would be the case, but I couldn't always see it. But you have to get through it.
Oh, there you go, indeed. Yeah, man. Because read the story and I'm like, oh shoot, like, yeah, it was a coming out party, and then folks are like, ha ha, kibosh time, let's fire you, buddy. Like, what the
Right.
hell?
Yeah. Yeah. I had about a year before that, I had, shared with my family I was gay. I had 3 kids that were teenagers and been in a marriage for about 20 years, and I was raised Catholic, wasn't sure how my family was going to take it. And, uh, and the things that I expected to struggle with, I didn't struggle with as much. I was fortunate that I had a really supportive family. The relationship with my children and that side of the family then and spouse, that obviously was pretty ripped up. Um, but then other things that I thought, oh, this part of life should be fine. I'll just keep the career going, do all these things. And I realized when you're not healthy, when you don't have that whole wheel like we look at in the book, where we look at all 4 aspects of this wellness wheel, when all of the things aren't working, you're rolling on a lopsided wheel. It's just like click clunk, click clunk, click clunk, and you're like, well, this part's okay, so how come everything else isn't? You got to have the whole thing working.
Definitely, indeed. Definitely gotta have the whole thing working, indeed. And I guess that's probably the beautiful thing about the book series, because it's gonna be a trilogy when it's all said and done, and so many different stories from so many different walks of life. Because yeah, that whole wheel, like, it's definitely important and integral. Because hey, if you neglect one area, you're gonna freaking feel it.
Yeah, and I think that sometimes we lean too far into one part of it, thinking that's going to give us the solution. Because if I feel like things are out of whack, but I'm a fit guy and I can stay on the fitness path, then everything else will come into line. Or if I'm spiritual and I can just focus here, but I'm ignoring my body, then it's like we lean into what feels good or what we're comfortable with, but that doesn't make the problems go away. And in fact, it kind of makes them fester a lot of times. And then we feel betrayed because we feel like, well, we're doing the right thing, we're doing healthy things, but if you're doing healthy things in one area while ignoring other areas that need attention, it doesn't do any good.
Yep, definitely right, indeed. Definitely right, indeed. So my goodness, man. So being able to get out of that phase, and heck, even the fact you had written in the book, what was it, 72 days of heartache, was it? Like, well, 78 weeks actually. My goodness. So like finally getting over that, like what up to get over that pain finally, man, and finally get to the other side of, all right, finally I can actually breathe for real now.
Yeah, that's a great question, because it was. it was a year and a half of just, God, this is getting worse and worse. And I thought things were going to get better. And I think that for me, what it really came down to was realizing that I could choose where my rock bottom was. Like I would wake up every day and be like, oh, what's gonna happen next? When's it gonna get worse? What's the next thing I'm gonna get hit over the head with? And I remember just sitting there one day thinking, I didn't do anything yesterday to make today better. So I can't expect today to be any better than yesterday was. Like I at some point had to be accountable for the fact that I have a choice. And that's just like the book. It's We Are Responsible. WAR is an acronym for We Are Responsible. And I had to learn that the hard way that, if I want today to be a little better, maybe I need to get out of my bed on time. Maybe I need to go outside. Maybe, clean up my act, eat breakfast, whatever simple thing I could do. Because I just got tired of living in that space. And I think, for me, when I came out, that was my biggest fear, was like coming out of the closet, being like, oh my gosh, what kind of life have you been wanting to live that you're not talking about? Or like, how many people have you been, like betraying emotionally by hiding this side of you? And at one point I got to a fear, the fear of not being myself became a bigger fear than actually being honest. And I think that's what happened when I got to that rock bottom place. Is it's like, okay, I'm afraid of moving forward, but at some point it's like, well, I'm afraid of living like this forever. If I don't make changes, this is what I'm going to get stuck with. And so that bigger fear now rose up, and it motivated me to make things happen.
There you go. And then my man's doing motivational speaking. So my goodness, so what led to finally take the charge and be like, yeah, I'm gonna motivate people.
Yeah, that's something that writing and speaking were kind of my two big things when I was younger, that I just always looked up to people who were doing those things. But when I was younger, I never felt like I had a story worth sharing. When people came to the school to talk, it was always someone who had, lost a limb through a horrific accident or disease, or had lived on the streets for years, or had been in prison and cleaned their act up and came out. And, there was always some big, larger than life event that this person had gone through. And that's what I saw as what would have to have happened in order to inspire people. And I had started blogging online, especially on LinkedIn a lot, and just sharing bits of things that were initially very safe, not even personal. And then I got into sharing more personal stuff. And I found that what I was writing was resonating with people. And it was resonating with people because they were seeing that they don't have to have a huge story for it to be a valuable story. And that made me realize that there's a lot of value in everyday lessons, in everyday connections, and in feeling like we can relate somehow to somebody. Sometimes that's more valuable than hearing a story that is someone who has, ran 23 marathons in a year and a half that most of us are not even going to do in our lifetime. And it just seems so unattainable that we can't relate to how that can help us. Because we're like, well, yeah, but that's that guy. But when it's the guy that's like, guy, I don't have any reason to say that it was hard to get out of bed today, but it was hard to get out of bed today. And this is what I did to kind of work myself through it. Then, the everyday person can go, gosh, that makes me feel like I can at least take another step.
There you go, right there. My man dropped the jewel right there, because your story doesn't have to be a huge one, y'all. It's right indeed. It's right indeed. You don't have to get into back-to-back car accidents with a truck and then conquer stage 17 cancer. You don't have to do all that, y'all. It's right indeed. It's right indeed. That's right indeed. It can be small and it can be impactful. Indeed. So, my goodness. So, speaking of impacting others, you got a wonderful podcast called Own Your Awkward Man. So, what led to the wonderful name for the podcast, and what are your three biggest lessons learned from it thus far?
Oh, that's a great question, Dom. I appreciate you asking that. What led to the name really was when I got started. I originally was talking about career advice when I got started on writing and speaking. I wasn't talking as much about personal stuff, but I started doing these quirky little videos because I was using the awkward thing about, your career could be awkward, it could be different than other people. And then I started getting into the personal side of things and talking about my journey. And at one point someone was like, I can't tell if you're trying to be serious or awkward. I feel like you kind of need to lean into it a little bit more and just own it. And it just kind of popped where it's like, oh yeah, own your awkward. And so when I started a podcast, we went with that name, and that name just really took off and really resonated with people because I've found that there's a lot of talk around authenticity and being yourself, but it's almost so much talk that we don't really know what being authentic means anymore. But if you say, hey, be your awkward self, it's kind of like saying fly your freak flag or whatever you want to relate it to. And people go, oh, I'm awkward. Like I have this thing. And that's an easy thing to relate to because we think right away of our quirks or those things that make us feel a little alienated. And with me, it's all about owning it in a way that makes that insecurity, makes that thing that feels a little different become your superpower. And that's really been, when you ask about the big three lessons, the one thing is everybody has something. Like everyone's in the closet about something, everyone's insecure about something. It could be that, you don't like that you love black licorice in a world where people hate black licorice and they can't believe you like it. Doesn't matter what that thing is, but you don't want to take the candy out of the bowl in front of your friends because you know you're going to get picked on. It doesn't have to be a big thing, but we all have something. And the other lesson is that that thing is usually what people love about us. It's what makes us different and unique. And when we can lean into it and when we can share it with people, it helps, it inspires. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, you know what? If I can walk up and say, this is awkward, I'm not good at this thing, or I feel odd in this situation, but this is what I want to make sure that I'm doing or that I'm helping with or that all of a sudden people go, oh, you're being as obviously sincere and vulnerable as you can by saying right up front, hey, I'm a little different in this regard, but this is what I bring to the table. Now we can really appreciate the thing you bring to the table because we know you're not trying to hide or fake something.
Right. It's true. It's right indeed. It's right indeed. So it's okay to like licorice, y'all. It's right indeed. It's freaking disgusting to me, though. I'm not a fan of that.
And that's the
I'm
thing,
like,
not everybody has to like it. It's all right.
exactly. That's the good thing about it. It's like, hey, folks are tired of these pleather jackets, y'all. They want the real dang thing, genuine leather dang gummit. That's right indeed. Even the vegans, metaphorically.
Right.
That's right indeed. So that's right. That's right. That true authenticity right there. That's right. Getting it started, listening to folks be like, yeah, just lean into it. That's right indeed. It's like signing a contract. Lean on the pen. That's right indeed. Own your come on. That's right indeed. Come on, just putting the awkward out there. So come on, just leaving it there alone. Come on, lean on it.
Yeah, exactly. And it honestly, it makes life easier. It makes it more fun and way more rewarding.
Yes, indeed. So any other lessons stick out from running your podcast so far, my man?
One of the I've had great just lessons along the way. Sometimes some of the things that people say, like when I started my podcast, it really was because I wanted to take this message further and bigger than myself and hear what other people's stories were. And I had one guest on, he was talking about those monsters in our head and how we have to change how we view them and not view them as monsters, view them as a puppy, because that puppy, it just needs to be trained. It's going to keep jumping on your leg, but now we have control over it. And it's this adorable thing that you want to pet, but it's going to misbehave versus this monster that's larger than life, that's always overbearing and scaring you and that you have to run from. Another guest shared that, we're afraid to fail, yet we don't make fun of babies when they fail learning how to walk. And you watch them try over and over again, and it's going to take that much work, but then we expect to be perfect the first time. And so these are just lessons that I am so honored to hear these lessons from my guests and take those into my life, because I feel like every day I am living, just it's like getting a PhD in self-help by surrounding myself with such amazing people and hearing their journey firsthand and going, wow, I need to remember that. And sometimes I listen to the old episodes and just to go back and hear how it was worded, because it's like, I want to remember what Jim said on that episode or what Chris said on the other episode.
So I'm talking about indeed. 'Cause, yeah, folks got stuff to share, lessons learned to help others learn and earn eventually too. That's right indeed. That's right indeed. Shorten that learning curve. That's right, indeed. Take it from a skyscraper to a 1 foot tall brick wall. That's right, indeed. That's right,
Right.
indeed. That's right, indeed. So, my goodness, man, since you've been quite a few interviews thus far on the guest side of the microphone, is there a question that you wish folks would ask you more often?
Oh, gosh, that's a good question. As I sit back and think about that, a lot of people like to know about, they always ask, what's your awkward? What's this? But a lot of people don't seem to ask about, like, they don't always want to ask about the struggles. They don't want to ask necessarily how you got through them. And I think sometimes those are the most important thing to talk about, because when people ask, how did you get through that darkest day? How did you share with someone that you have a relationship with, that you're in love with, that you have a partnership with? How do you share with them that you're stepping aside or walking a different way, or that even you don't know if you're going to, but you have something that's some piece of you that they didn't know? And I think a lot of times people are afraid that they're going to offend or that they're going to push too far. But a lot of times those are the questions that if asked the right way can do the most good for people who are in a place where they need to hear them.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about, indeed. Yeah, because one question or that popped up in my head while reading your story is like, oh yeah, the divorce and the kids. It's like, so how are things with the kids? Are they still able to see daddy and talk to daddy
Yeah, and
still?
my kids are all young adults now, and
Okay.
that has been a journey, and it's still a growth. Like it definitely was rough, just because any changes in relationships are with especially with divorce. And when you have divorce and then you find out that one parent is different than you grew up knowing them to be, then there's this sense of betrayal. At one point my son said, well, I don't care that you're gay, I just don't understand why you ever would have lied about it. And to me, that made me feel very good as a parent, that we raised him in a way that that wasn't something that bothered him. Uh, and it also reminded me that these kids are raised in a different age than I was raised in. I wasn't raised in an age where I'm like, and I can't say to a 20-year-old, well, gosh, you just don't know what it was like, 20, 30 years ago. But, there was this mixed feeling of sadness that this is the perception that they have of their father. And then also, you know, happiness that this is the heart that's in the kid that you raised. And things are going a good direction. The biggest thing for me was I had to stop thinking, I had to stop taking everybody else's reactions and weighing them as to how I thought they were related to me. And thinking, if I text my 20-year-old and they don't reply for a day or two, that might not be because they're mad at dad. It might not be because they hate dad because he came out of the closet. It could be because they're a 20-year-old, and 20-year-olds just don't text their dads back that often or want to hang out with dad all the time. And in reality, I didn't call my parents very often when I was 20 either. So as soon as I had that realization of like, oh, I need to stop reading into what I am assuming other people's actions are all about. And then when I do talk to them, enjoy the time. When they call and say, oh, sorry, I'm just getting back to you, just be like, hey, I'm glad to talk to you right now. And as soon as I could change my attitude, that started really changing the growth in the relationship to getting back on track.
Heck yeah, man, you're definitely right. Because that's the thing with text messaging. It's like, shit, it depends on the person. And of course, like, where our attention spans are basically shot to near
Hmm.
nil. It's like, oh, text message. Oh, I'll respond to him later. And it's
Right.
like later, it's like 2 days later because you forgot and got distracted with 50 other things. And then you have a bushy tail coming out of your back.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I just had this happen not too long ago, where it was like I'm thinking, oh, I never hear back from my kid, and I've, texted and called and texted, and I look at the history, I'm like, oh, I guess I haven't texted and called as much as I thought I had. You know, it's like, oh, when I examine the evidence, I need to be more proactive to make sure that things are, you're working on a relationship with someone, you got to put the work in.
Yes, indeed. I've got to put the work in, indeed. And when you're working, sometimes it involves some good old food to get your energy back up. So, if the fabulous book, Win the Wellness War, we are responsible for all things wellness. If that book it were a food, what would it be and why?
Oh gosh, if this were a food, I think it would be like a stir fry because it would be loaded with healthy vegetables, full of nutrition, exploding with flavor, but so many different types of flavor because there are so many contributors in this book with so many different stories that are all good for you in different reasons. And I just that idea of a stir fry comes to mind of just, loaded with goodness, warms your belly, makes you feel good, and any single bite is going to have a different flavor to it, but they don't taste bad when you have it all together.
There you go. That's right, indeed. Stir fry, indeed. First person actually mentioned stir fry to my knowledge when I asked that question.
I don't even know why that popped in my head, but all the comfort foods just didn't seem healthy enough to do the book justice.
Hey, a lot of ladies say chocolate is a wellness food, you know.
Sure, that's true. I definitely like to believe that because it makes me feel good about how much chocolate I eat.
That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. So, my goodness, we're coming down to the magical question that every guest gets to receive. And that is if you wake up tomorrow and you're 25 again, but you're still in the current year, what advice would you give to yourself?
Man, that's something I think about quite a bit, especially when I'm doing motivational speaking. I have to think about I'm going out and talking to young people a lot, and what is that advice that could be helpful? And really for myself, because I spend a lot of time making sure that I'm not living in regrets from the choices and directions I've taken in my life, but taking the lessons from it. And so if I were to tell myself as a 25-year-old right now, I would say, just be yourself, be okay with it. And the people that you need to support you are going to rise and be right there with you. And you're going to find the people that you need, and you're going to live an amazing life. And it's going to be a lot more fun, a lot more rewarding if all of your energy is just going into doing the things that you want to do and surrounding yourself with the people that you love rather than trying to fake it for anybody else.
Here you go, folks. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. Folks, tired of the fake. That's right, indeed. Fake don't last. That's right, indeed. Realness definitely does. That's right, indeed. Even if it feels like a kick to the gut sometimes, and heck,
Yeah.
even a kick to the back after you try to get back up from the kick to the gut.
Right. Yeah. You think it's like, oh, I got it. I can get through this. It's like, oh, nope, there it is. There's that kick again.
Just a flying missile drop kick out, and they're like, "Oh, dang gummit!"
Like, yeah, what just happened to me out of nowhere?
That's right, indeed. And then you wake up in the cornfield, and you're like, "Up, that might have been one of Dom's disciples of punny jokes." Uh,
Yeah. You got to have the army out there working for you.
That's right, indeed. But hey, the good news is it's just a cornfield, nothing more. Oh yeah,
Right.
we don't let kids in the cornfield for obvious reasons, you know. It gets a little creepy at night.
It does. Yeah, that cannot be trusted.
Well, man, oh man, it ain't just about corn on the cob and armadillos and bunnies. So my goodness. So for those who need to keep up with all the stuff that you're doing, my man, what's the best way for folks to do so, Andy?
Oh, there's a couple ways you can check out my website. It's awkwardcareer.com. There's easy links there to follow me, to subscribe to get emails, or to just reach out if you want to have a conversation. Or you can find me all over social media. I'm always happy to connect, to have followers, to just share what I can and help people just get through their day. It's Andy Vargo or Own Your Awkward all over all the socials.
Oh, well, there you have it, folks. We're going to put some magical links that'll lead you directly to Andy's goods and services. And be sure to cop some copies of not only the good old Win the Wellness War, but also his books as well, because he's got a bunch of them under his name. Indeed. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. Support fellow authors, y'all, especially fellow bookcasters who took the
Right.
extra step and started a podcast too. Because hey, some would say it's a thankless job sometimes. Working hard, harder than a boulder in Colorado. You never know. Yep, never know indeed.
I love it. You're full of them.
Oh yeah, they just keep on coming. So my goodness, before Dwayne appears and gets mad at the boulder, any parting word before we close up shop?
I love the name of your podcast. I love the direction. I think that going north is such a great direction to go. And I just say, we can all head that direction. And every day you just take one step towards the life you want to live. Do it by being your best self. And, if you end up taking a step east or west or back south, don't beat yourself up too much. Just the next day you get up, take another step or two the way you want to go.
If you're hearing this part of the episode, that means you're one cool individual. Thanks a bunch for tuning in, and if you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to share it with at least one other person in your network. Bonus points for 3. And be sure to check out the backlog too while you're at it, because there are hundreds of wonderful episodes to choose from as well.